Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how I use the drawstring cast on method on a round loom to create this flower kind of top that you can see on this hat here. This is a baby hat. I'm actually a bit worried about how small it is. I've made it for my sister's newborn, but we'll see how it goes. The flower comes from doing the drawstring cast on method and skipping every second peg. So I'll show you how that works. Now what I'm using is 4 strands of this very thin baby yarn, and I'm using it as one. So you just want to start by tying a slip knot, and I'm bloody terrible at these. Give me a sec, hang on. Don't laugh. Okay, so start with a slip knot, don't worry about how terrible it is, and pop it on your anchor peg. Then what you want to do is, whichever direction you prefer going on the loom, go in that direction, because I prefer going clockwise. For the first 3 or 4 times I did this, I started off anti-clockwise. It works both ways. So you want to go under the first peg, and we're kind of going to ignore this peg as our first peg and use the second peg as the more important peg. I'm not going to say the first peg because that will confuse you. So go in front of the second peg, behind 3, in front of 1, behind 3, in front of 1, behind 3, in front of 1, whoops, 1, behind 3, in front of 1, behind 3, in front of 1, and you'll be left with 2. So you can see the last 2 and the first peg will all, if you follow the pattern, be going behind. Okay, so what you've got now is as a sort of hexagon shape. If you do this on a bigger loom, you will get a different shape, but it only works on looms with pegs that are multiples of 4. So it works on the 12 peg loom, it works on the 36 peg loom. I tried it on the 31, it looks awful. I suspect it would work on the 41 peg loom if you skipped the final peg and pretend it didn't exist at all. But I'll show you what I mean when I show you the other examples I've done. So the second part of the drawstring cast on is to go right the way around, keeping the working yarn on the top, and you take it all the way around back to the start. And I just use this first peg so that when I wrap it, it stays in place, right? Don't confuse that as being a loop that you knit off or anything. So then what you want to do is get your knitting tool, and you want to knit off every 4th peg. So you want to knit off that second peg, skip those 3, knit off. I mean, obviously you can see which ones you're going to knit off because they don't have a second piece of yarn on them. So you're basically going to go around and do 6 knit off stitches. And the yarn is a little bit tight at this stage, but it shouldn't be unworkable. If it's unworkable, you've wound it way too tight, and just start it again. So once you've done that, you want to go around and, okay, remember to keep, when you take this one off, remember these 3 pegs should all have it in front, like that. So what you've got now is can you see that shape? So you've got every 4th peg has a single wrap around it, and every 3 are in together. So now what you want to do is you want to E-wrap every second peg. So you E-wrap the peg that you've already knitted, and then that middle peg from the set of 3, skipping 1. So the peg that you've knitted and the middle peg. So you're just wrapping every second peg all the way around. It's a pain with 4, hang on. Alright, so you will wrap that last peg, and now you can just wrap straight down onto your anchor peg, and it makes it, I just find having the second peg here as the first peg that you start with, easier for holding onto your yarn while you're working around. So that's why I do that. So now you want to listen to trucks beat their horn. Now you want to knit off every second peg. So you're starting by the one that you've already knitted, and then the center of the 3. Now this is a weird one to knit off because you're not actually knitting anything off. You're just pushing it behind and pushing the E-wrap that's on there down. So I'll show you again. You knit off the regular one, and it is a little bit tighter here, and you knit off the middle one of the 3 by just pushing it behind and pushing that E-wrap down. So knitting off and then pushing behind, knitting off, pushing behind, knitting off, pushing behind, knitting off, and then on that final peg, pushing behind. But I'm going to undo my working yarn for this and just carry it over so that it's out of the way, and push this one behind. Okay, so bring your working yarn back to where it was. So that's the cast on, and now what you want to do is E-wrap every peg and do, no, you don't want to E-wrap every peg, sorry, getting ahead of myself. You want to keep E-wrapping every second peg for 3 rows. So starting with number 2 and going 2, 4, 6. I'll show you, let me put my tool down. And you want to do this 3 more times. So everything you've done up to now, don't count that. I count that as the cast on. And now you just want to go around wrapping every second peg, knitting it off, and do that 3 times. Should have picked an easier wool to demonstrate with. Anyway, I'm gonna cut, and I'll come back to you when I've done all 3. Okay, so what I've done is I've done 3 rows of wrapping and knitting off every second peg, starting on peg 2, which was our important peg, and going 2, 4, 6, 8, all the way around, 3 times. So now it's time to wrap every peg. So go ahead and start with peg 1, and just wrap the whole way around. Sorry, this wool is driving me crazy. Wrap the whole way around. Wrap the whole way around and anchor it. And then go ahead and knit off every single peg. And you'll find that every second peg, the ones you've been working on, feel like a normal knit, and every odd peg feel they're a little bit tougher and less bouncy. They're a bit harder to knit off, basically. Well, the first one is, the others get a bit easier. So go ahead and continue E-wrapping for, I don't know, 4 or 5 rows at least before you can test your drawstring. When you pull this all together though, the flower ends up on the inside of the work. So if you're doing regular E-wraps, the finished product will have the purl stitch as the stitch that's showing on the outside. So let me just finish this row and I'll show you what I mean. So the baby hat that I did before, this is where the flower ended up, and you can see the stitch that's showing is the purl stitch, which I quite like. I quite like the purl stitch showing. Ignore my funny looking brim. But if you prefer to have the knit stitch showing, which is this side of the work, then what you have to do is you actually have to purl all of your stitches. So after doing one row of E-wraps, if you want the knit stitch showing on your finished work, continue doing every peg but purl it, if that makes sense. So I'll come back when I've done maybe 4 or 5 rows and I'll show you how it pulls all together. Okay, so I'm back and I've just done 5 rows of plain E-wraps. Like I said before, you could do 5 rows of pearls if you want the knit stitch to show. So now what you want to do is take off your slip knot from your anchor peg and pull it down so that it's coming out of the bottom. And I'm just going to secure my working yarn again because I'm a little bit OCD like that. And then what you want to do is you want to gently pull. First I'm going to take the knot out, and then you want to gently pull on your drawstring at the bottom, and what you should see happening is a flower forming. So if you pull it nice and tight, and there's your flower. So that becomes the top of your hat now, and you keep knitting as many rows until the hat is as long as you want, and then you do some sort of brim if you like, and cast off, and you're done. But basically this is a cool little top to the hat that's kind of like a pom-pom without actually having to do a pom-pom, and you don't have to sew it on because it's already, you know, built in. So it's quite fluffy when you do it with 4 strands of wool, and it looks very rounded and flower-like. But I'll just show you some of the other ones that I've done. Okay, so this is one that I did on the 36 peg loom, and you can see it's got 8 petals instead of 6, because obviously for every 4 pegs you get a petal. You can also see that it's a lot more pointed than on the baby hat. On the baby hat it comes out quite fluffy and rounded, and I think that's just because I've used 4 strands of yarn and they get all nice and fluffy, whereas here I've used 1, and you can see that it looks more like a star than a flower. I'll show you the attempt that I made, if I can get it over here, the attempt that I made on the 31 peg loom, and what I did was I skipped the final peg. You can see here that I just kind of ignored it for a bit, which didn't work because then there wasn't multiples of 4. So I've got some lovely petal shapes and this mess. But if you could find a way to add 1 extra peg, so this was a 32 peg loom, I'm sure it would work. You could maybe use the anchor peg or something. Or if you've got one of those looms that you can change the number of pegs, 32 would work. The 41 peg loom, the really big one, that would work if you skipped the last peg and pretended that there were only 40. You would end up with a little bit of this gap that you have here, but it wouldn't be as noticeable and all your points should look proper. So that's how I did the drawstring cast on that turns into a flower. It's just by skipping every second peg, and you get this funny little pom-pom top. I hope somebody tries it, and if you do, send me pictures of what you make because I'm curious. Thanks.